Hello everyone and welcome to episode 3 of my Road to Keystone Master series. I'm Diode and this video is going to be a bit different from the first two. Instead of just doing the run-of-the-mill recap of everything I did during my playtime, I'll go a bit in depth with my gameplay. Try to see if I can identify what I did wrong, what I did right, and how I can better myself for future runs. Sadly, during this session, I could only play for a few hours on a Sunday, so I only managed to clear 3 dungeons and 3 LFR bosses. Hey, if I could play this game for 10 hours every day, this series would have been way easier to record and complete. But you're not here to listen to my woes, you're here to see how I did on my mythic dungeons, and this week was a real snap back to reality. So be sure to subscribe, click the bell, and do all the good stuff that the YouTube overlords love, and yeah, roll the intro. Before we get into the dungeons, have you seen the traders post for this month? I'm really digging the rewards this time and I'll be taking some time to complete the entire thing just to get that sweet Jester transmog, along many other items that I have my eyes on. A lot of the quests include defeating raid and mythic dungeon bosses, so I think they'll be mostly completed with normal play without having to step away too much from my usual sessions. Okay, so quick recap. World boss, as usual, drops nothing, but during my world questing I finished the Accord quest and I was surprised that I actually got an upgrade from that. Cool! The vault this time had a nice back piece with haste on it, but the ring I unlocked was a way bigger upgrade for my auction house PvP green ring, and it also has my biz stats with haste and versatility, so the choice was pretty obvious this time. I also get my mythic key, which is a +7 Shadow Moon Burial Grounds with the Tyrannical, Bursting, and Grievous affixes on rotation with the seasonal affix of Thundering, which I'll discover later on in the video. I think this is the first time I must deal with Bursting and Grievous, so let's quickly go over them. Bursting is a stackable debuff that occurs whenever you unalive enemy mobs. It lasts for 4 seconds, and the more enemies you make Alt F4 from life in a group, the higher the damage your healer has to deal with, which is not being nice to your healers. And if there's one life lesson you must take with you from these videos, is to always be nice to your healers. Moving on to Grievous, this little nasty debuff happens whenever your health drops below 19%. You and every party member damaged during the fight will have the debuff on them, which can be removed by direct heals from, you guessed it, your healer, or honestly anyone in your party that has healing spells or abilities. But you know WoW players, they're like you whenever you played Pokemon as a kid and you only taught your Charmander damaging attacks, because if it wasn't doing damage, it sucked. Same thing applies here. WoW players tend to focus on their DPS and just their DPS. A lot of the fights in these dungeons would have been so much easier to deal with if people interrupted casts, used defensive, or helped the healer during downtimes between pulls. I can't exclude myself from this behavior because I have always played like that. I've told you guys on the first and the second episode that I am not a good player, so take me as an example on how to get better at the game. Now let's get to Draenor and head back to the Shadow Moon Burial Grounds yet again. The group forms unexpectedly fast. Considering the affixes this week, I expected every healer to be on strike, but they were one of the first people to sign up for the run. I decided to bring a priest for healing, a warrior for melee DPS, a hunter for some range goodness, and an evoker for some AoE damage, and most importantly, bloodlust, just in case the hunter didn't have a pet with the ability. The run starts as usual, with everyone saying their friendly hellos, and we take the first pull. Now this is where I found out how dangerous Grievous really is. It's the first pull of the dungeon and my health is yo-yoing all over the place. I'm getting multiple stacks of the debuff and I'm spamming my abilities as fast as I can. The important thing to note is that none of those abilities are my defensives. You can see a lot of global cooldowns being activated after continuous button presses, yet my Iron Fur, my Incarnate, my Survival Instincts, Frenzy Regeneration, and every other tool I have at my disposal remains unused. Which brings me back to one of the discussion points I had early on with people not contributing to make fights easier. I have interrupts, defensive, disruptors, instant heals, anything that I could have used, yet I didn't. Thankfully our healer was amazing and kept us alive, but after the fight I had to pop out of bear form and do some spot healing to clear the grievous stacks in our party. The next pull is important because it shows how I as a tank can help the party even further. You see me charge into the pack, and as soon as I see the warrior drop their Spear of Bastion, I try to position myself so that every mob in the pack is hit by the AoE of that ability. At the same time, I moved the party away from the evoker's healing so I could have positioned the mobs a bit closer, or I could have moved myself and thus the warrior into the heal without compromising DPS. The first boss, Sedana Blood Fury, can get a bit hectic if your party doesn't know how to position properly during the fight. It's pretty straightforward, but if you let yourself get overwhelmed by all the effects on the screen, you'll be dispatched quickly. You generally want to stay away from the daggers on the ground, which emit constant damage to those in range, so as a tank you move the boss around the arena to keep your players away from those daggers. During the Eclipse phase, you just move into one of the lit runes on the ground in the outer circle until the phase subsides and you're good to go. Just be sure not to stand still doing DPS on the boss, because, I don't know if you're aware, you do less DPS when you're enjoying the sweet embrace of the afterlife. Both the Hunter and the Evoker take a trip to the Shadowlands here, so we end up 3-manning the boss. The rest of the dungeon was pretty straightforward. Controlled pulls as to not overwhelm the healer, helping out with heals whenever possible to alleviate the stress, and carry on. Now, I have read guides and seen videos on how to pull on this bridge, and everyone says to pull to the area closest to where you came from. In this instance, my right. Not like I do here, where I go to the left and end up pulling the bats by mistake. Luckily, this is just a +7 and the warrior is carrying on DPS, so these random mobs aren't much of a threat, just be very careful on higher levels. The next boss, Bone Maw, was pretty uneventful, so we're gonna skip that part. With the final boss, Ner'zhul, you want everyone in your group to avoid Malevolence, or else you'll end up with a one-way ticket to the Shadowlands and you do not want to go back there. Except maybe for Ardenweald, I actually like that place. Maybe playing a druid was written in the stars for me all along. Anyway, the rest of the fight is as usual. Avoid Malevolence, stay away from the pulsating staff on the ground, and pick a target from the Ritual of Bones to burn down. This first ritual phase was actually good, I believe. I quickly identified a target, moved on to attack it, and the group followed along while dodging Ner'zhul's attack. The second ritual phase wasn't so graceful. I was taking a lot of damage, I was badly positioned since I didn't notice the ritual was happening behind me, and I turned my back to the boss for a while, taking a bunch of unnecessary damage. Never, as a tank, put your back to the boss. You can't dodge, block, or parry any damage with your booty, no matter how thick it is. The third ritual was handled much better, though I should have picked a target that wasn't going to walk on top of the pulsating shadow damage. We complete the key, get no loot, I thank my hero for their amazing job, and I get ready for the second run of the night, a +9 Court of Stars. Is it weird that I haven't gotten a single Dragonflight dungeon during this challenge? I've done multiple Court of Stars, Burial Grounds, and Halls of Valor, so maybe I'll get to the current content soon, but for now, Suramar waits. So 3 druids, a hunter, and a warrior walk into Suramar. There's no punchline, that was just the crew composition for this dungeon. You've seen me run this place few times now, so I'll make this part short because the run was pretty well handled, and we didn't have many mishaps. The first pull goes great, things get defeated quickly, we don't cause the healer too much hassle, and we clear the mobs easily, though I do want to point out another mistake on my part. When facing the construct, you want to interrupt their suppress ability, which locks down one of your party members for the duration. You can let charging station go off unless there are other mobs in the pack where they would get healed. But look at this reaction time when the construct casts his charge smash. 1, 2, I almost take 3 full seconds to move out of it when I should have moved as soon as it started casting so I didn't take extra damage. The next few pulls go great. I panicked a bit when I saw so many mobs on me considering the affixes, but we only lose the warrior to a panther pounce. Good thing to point out is that I could have prevented that by placing a vortex on me so that the panthers would have gotten sucked back into my position and not pounced on anyone in my group. The first boss fight goes off without a problem thanks to someone in my group being an alchemist and poisoning his potion. Moving on to the courtyard, and thanks to Quasi's video guide, I know how to tank enforcers next to a pillar so we can LOS the fell detonation and take no damage from it. With 4 enforcers and the mini bosses down, it was time to fight Flame Wreath. This fight has only one major mechanic to deal with: Infernal Eruption, which spawns an imp on every party member's location, which is why the group stacks on the tank and moves away once the swirlies appear on the ground. The goal here is to interrupt or defeat the imps quickly so they don't get to cast their spells, or it will be bad news for you and your group. A few rounds like that and the boss is done. We find the imposter and vote him off the ship, and we finally move on to the final boss of the dungeon, Mr. McWhirly Spinny Guy. For this, you want a caster to stay the furthest away from the group and in a general area, so when the boss spawns its shades, they're all grouped up in the same place. Not like we are doing here, where everyone's running around like crazy. That's bad. The boss is simple aside from that, so just avoid the purple lines on the ground and keep everyone but one player in your group close to you to manage the shades. Another key down, another lootless run. The final key to end my Sunday night was a +10 Nokhud offensive. Remember when I said I hadn't done a Dragonflight dungeon at all after I started the challenge? Well, this is not what I had in mind for the first one. Even less so a +10 where I'd have to deal with a seasonal affix, Thundering. This affix charges everyone in the party with either a positive or negative energy called Mark of Lightning and Mark of Wind respectively. This gives the players a boost in damage and healing for 15 seconds, but if you don't clear the charges by running through a player with an opposite mark, you take a lot of damage and are stunned for a while. So if you're not comfortable with the affix, just run to a player with a mark opposite to yours and clear the charges. Once you're more comfortable with it, take advantage of the buff and clear before the 15 seconds are up. Since there are 5 players, the tank should always have a charge, since if no other charge is active, it will fall off without the stun or the damage. Aside from that added stress, Nokhud is a nasty dungeon with many big mob groups, patrols, and a lot of casts you need to interrupt. So the people you bring have to be on their A+ game with AoE stuns, interrupt, disruptors, reflexed, and so on. Or things like this might happen. Sadly, I was too focused on the dungeon and forgot to record the first quarter of it. But the first boss is no big deal, just use defensives to stay alive and have a ranged DPS deal with the weapons whenever the boss is casting Eruption. The second boss is the Raging Tempest. Clear all the mob camps around the boss arena and just head in. This boss is all about the balls. The blue balls. The blue lightning balls it spawns during the fight. This video is not sponsored by Manscaped, but you should really take care of those balls. Whenever they spawn, everyone in the group should move around and grab as many as they can to boost their damage for a while. The buff lasts a few seconds, so spacing them out to keep the buff rolling is the preferred method. If you don't handle the balls, they become overcharged and sploosh all over your party with lightning AoE that hurts badly. That's basically it for this guy. Just watch the balls, grab the balls, and move away when you have the big energy circle around you. The usual stuff. Also, balls. So many balls. To activate the next boss, you need to head to the Nokhud graveyard and defeat the packs on top of the hills. There's a lot of interrupts you need to take care of here, or you will be overwhelmed by ads in no time, and like the paladin says here, too much bursting. So learn to interrupt, learn to crowd control, and things should be fine. The next fight is pretty simple. It's just a twin boss fight with, I believe, shared health bars, so you can tunnel into one or cleave both whenever you have the chance. Now, I had no idea how to approach this fight, and it has been, in my mind, the worst pull I have ever done as a tank in all my years of playing WoW. I'm gonna let a bit play out in real time, but in short, I was running all over the place, the group wasn't well positioned for the tornadoes, I was always trying to keep both bosses together so my melee players were running around playing tag with me and the bosses. It was honestly a mess on my part, but every bad experience counts as a learning opportunity. The last boss, Balakar Khan, is pretty straightforward. It's just a single target tank and spank with an ad phase where you just melt down the mobs and move on back to the boss. After the transition, the boss starts throwing out a spear at a player, which can be avoided after the ground is marked. A good tip for this is to tell your party to keep the spear close to the group so you don't have to run far away to re-engage the boss, and so that the group doesn't get yanked from across the arena to the spear location. Just keep it close, keep it tight, use your defensive, and don't get run over by the centaurs. Sadly, I wasn't familiar with the dungeon and I still had 13% of the completion left after the final boss was defeated. I panicked, rushed into a group, got feared, and wiped the group because I wanted to time the key. Whenever you're in a situation like this, take a deep breath and follow a plan. Trying to AoE the entire dungeon in the last pull will lose you more time than going back pack by pack for the clear. This key was sadly depleted, and it's the first one where I really felt that I had let down my group. I didn't clear the percentage requirement, I didn't know the optimal route, and there were 1,000 things that I could have done differently. Well, another play session done with minimal progress made. My score hasn't really increased that much, my gear is pretty much stuck with me, counting on only Mythic Plus drops and weekly vault rewards. I must change my approach to the game if I want to achieve Keystone Master. I know life takes priority to gaming, I have my full-time job, I have my master's degree going on, but if I set myself on this road, it's my job as a player and now uploading this video for you guys to enjoy to really get on the grind and get things done. So I will refocus all my IRL stuff for the weekdays and leave WoW for the weekends. I have no idea if my videos will be shorter or longer with this change, but I really hope you guys will give me your feedback down in the comments. As usual, I suck at outros, so subscribe, like, and all that stuff, and I will see you next reset.